Chapter 25. The silence in the family room was a solid thing. Colville studied the faces of the young men as they sat in the circle waiting. All but one of them, from Alex on his left to Owen on his right, wore the same look. Haunted, helpless. All but Reef. Reef's face was empty, as though everything in it had been wrung out, a dishcloth and a dry sink. Everyone waited. The boys had been there that morning when the call came, had seen Colville run to the truck and tear out of the driveway, then return later with Reef. Or someone who looked like Reef, the person who sat in the circle with them now, but surely not the person who'd sat there every other evening, his eyes barely masking the bored sneer behind them. This was a different Reef, hollow, depleted, a body that breathed. Everyone waited. The boys knew some of it, had heard him shouting up on the third floor, not shouting really, which would have implied the manufacture of words, more like sounds than speech, patternless, without form or function. Yet threaded throughout had been Frank Colville's low tones, his comments stitching meaning into the torn fabric of that morning. Everyone waited. The sounds had lasted a long time, and then Colville had come downstairs alone. He shook his head when Alex offered to go up. Give him some time, he'd said. And they had. They all had. Morning had become noon, then afternoon, and afternoon had stretched into night. And then Reef had come down. Not the Reef they knew, though, some other Reef. Everyone waited. And then they didn't have to wait any longer. This other Reef drew a breath, the sound ragged and shallow, then he spoke. Even before they neared her room, Reef heard evidence of Lisa's good news. She was singing. Her voice was terrible. Someone more charitable might have called it untrained, and yet oddly beautiful, in the way that storm clouds have beauty, their tattered edges like dark lace against the lighter sky behind them. She was humming an old Bruce Springsteen song, every few seconds breaking into remembered words and phrases, so the effect was like hearing one side of a conversation, a dialogue between Lisa then and Lisa now. When they reached the doorway, Brett grinned at him broadly and then sped off. Standing there, Reef could see Lisa in her wheelchair by her locker, putting something into the lower compartment. She was bending at the waist, and a gasp momentarily interrupted her singing as her position put strain on the flesh around her metal pins. But then she continued, Springsteen's lyrics accompanying her task once more. Something else was different. On Lisa's bedside table were framed photographs that had not been there during Reef's earlier visits. Some of them were photographs of Lisa and another girl, and some were pictures of the girl alone. The girl looked much like Lisa, her hair the same shade of blonde, her smile the same crooked line that suggested an effort to keep from laughing, probably at the antics of the photographer. Ellen, thought Reef. Hi, he said. Ow! He'd startled her, and turning quickly, she'd bumped her head on the open locker door. But she smiled when she saw the person in the doorway. Reef, she said. How are you doing? He asked. House cleaning, or locker cleaning, actually. Making room for some more things. She beamed. I'm getting these off tomorrow. She pointed at the medal on her leg. I'll actually be able to wear clothes again. He entered the room and stood by the end of her bed. Brett told me. Must be a relief, huh? You have no idea, Lisa trilled. And, she continued more softly, everyone agrees that I have you to thank for that. Reef felt his cheeks burn, hotter than salsa this time, stove hot. I didn't do anything, he said. He picked up one of the photographs. You look like her, he said gently. We both took after our mom, Lisa explained, which is another reason why I'm glad you're here. My mother wants to meet you. When Reef glanced around the room, Lisa added, she went down to the cafeteria to get me another milkshake. She shrugged. It's a mother thing. She hasn't been here for a while, and she thinks she has to make up for the lost time. She made a face. I've drunk enough milk and eaten enough foods with milk in them to last me a lifetime. When I get out of this place, the first thing I'm going to do is drop kick a carton of 2% as far as I can. As if choreographed, a strawberry milkshake carton fell to the floor in the doorway, a plastic straw oozing pink liquid onto the tiles.